بلندگو باز دوباره شروع کرد. The megaphone has started again. When I was a kid, my parents' favorite Persian joke was to call me an outspoken megaphone. Especially among my aunts and uncles in Iran, they would always tease the poor soul who was chosen to sit next to me at family dinner, explaining I was about to talk their ear off. Now, there is one exception to this rule. On one of my last trips to Iran, my breath was taken away, and this time not by my grandmother's amazing walnut stew. Instead, when I stepped out at the airport, I looked up and saw a blanket of smog completely covering the sky and burning through my lungs. The more time I spent in Iran, I started to realize that this horrible air quality was actually hospitalizing thousands of people every single day. And not only that, but this air pollution was a symptom of a larger crisis, the climate crisis, and that temperatures in the Middle East were rising more than twice the global average. And I wouldn't be much of a megaphone if I didn't talk about this. So I decided to work with my mom, and we sifted through my 6th grade homework about climate change, and I decided to translate these resources into Farsi so I could give my relatives a speech at my grandmother's next dinner about what was happening to their community. At this family dinner, I stood up and I told my relatives that the burning hot heat waves that they were seeing year after year were actually getting worse because of the burning of fossil fuels. For the first time, my relatives looked at me with fear in their eyes. My translations had succeeded in convincing them that climate change was a real and pressing threat. But as I reflected, I soon realized that this was not just a problem with my family or even with Iran. This was a global issue. Because the statistics surrounding this are alarming. 75% of the world doesn't speak English, but 80% of scientific resources are only available in English. And specifically, when looking at climate change, the UN's IPCC report, widely regarded as the most renowned piece of climate literature in the world, is only officially available in the 6 UN languages. And these languages account for less than half of the world's speaking population. Meaning, the majority of people in the world are being left behind in our advocacy. And even more importantly, that people on the front lines, like my relatives, marginalized communities that are being worse impacted by the climate crisis, don't have access to the resources they need. They don't have the science to actually advocate for their communities and speak up about these injustices. And they're also ill-equipped to deal with the climate disasters that are impacting their communities. Now, that's when it hit me. This was not an issue of resources. This was not an issue of knowledge. This was an issue of accessibility. So when I was 17, I decided to start Climate Cardinals with the goal that one day, everyone, everywhere, would know about climate change and they would care enough to take action. In the early days, I recruited from my childhood bedroom in McLean, Virginia, all of my friends, and I baited them with community service hours to do translations for me into the different languages that they and their relatives speak. We would swap around words like ingredients, adding a dash of namak and felfel, salt and pepper, to our English conversations. Now, just a few years later, using the power of social media, we have been able to mobilize millions of words of climate translation through a network of 10,000 student volunteers across 80 countries, and we've done translations into over 100 different languages. And this story to me really illustrates the power of language and culture to connect a diverse group of young people with one common thread, which was this passion for climate action and a love and care for our planet. Now we've even partnered with Google, with their AI and machine learning translation team to automate and streamline much of our translation processes. And our work has spread across the globe, especially helping those in the global south to access these resources. And our core team now spans all the way from Johannesburg to India, and even my right-hand man, Hikaru, who I've corresponded with for the last 4 years, who has helped me through every partnership I've never had the pleasure of meeting in person. Our efforts have really borne fruit, and we're now helping everyone from the UN to the Yale Center for Climate Communications do translations, and we're aiming to translate at least 1.5 million words of resources every single year across 40 different projects. What we've started is not just a nonprofit, it truly is a movement. And the biggest thing that my journey has taught me is that when it comes to climate change, language should not be a barrier to entry. Everyone should be empowered to become a climate advocate and to talk about climate justice. My team and I now swap around words and sentences like puzzle pieces until, aha. With the addition of a final comma, our concern for the planet is successfully distilled into ink. Thank you.